Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Michael, how you doing?
Good, good. So you recently finished the Thames 200K in the UK. This was the inaugural year. Congratulations. How has your recovery been going?
Ooh, so yeah, the recovery actually was not too bad. So 2 or 3 days after the race, as of anything sort of the sort of like the multi-day, sort of like 20-hour plus, the legs for me take it the most. So
Yeah.
getting up and down stairs, yeah, that's always a bit of a challenge. Getting into and out of the car, but uh, no real blisters. 2 or 3 days, some active recovery in the sauna, steam, floating around the pool, and yeah, back to normal.
Nice, nice. That sounds great. Well, hey, I want to get right into the race first off the bat. You're no stranger to long distances. Finished the Yukon 1000 a couple years ago on a stand-up paddleboard. That's a PhD level undertaking. What made you decide to do the Thames? Is it a river you paddle on?
It's an interesting one. So I found ultra endurance paddling quite late in my paddling kind of journey, and the Yukon 1000 was one of the first ultras I did, as it
Hmm.
were, which is it's the longest as well, 1,000 miles. But because I've always then started looking for uh, ultra paddleboard races in and around where I live in the UK,
Hmm.
um, and the Thames has been one of those. It, it is near me. I mean, it's a couple of hours away.
Okay.
Um, it's one of those rivers that's good to train on, and it's a famous river. Of course, it is. The part of the Thames goes through central London, past Houses of Parliament. Anyone that's travelled to the UK and to London has seen
Hmm.
the Thames, and it's quite interesting to think that it starts in a boggy field, 200 kilometres,
Okay.
out in the countryside, and it goes from a field into a trickle into
Huh.
the river into what we see, going through London on the tidal tide and out to the sea. So it's always had that kind of interest in that respect. And the Thames Ultra 200 was a new race that I actually only heard about a few weeks before
Oh, wow.
it was going to go ahead. And it was really it was a canoe sort of kayak race organised by some very well known and experienced canoe and kayakers on the UK scene. But they wanted to give paddleboards a go as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, it seemed a, a great thing to add into the diary. I wasn't actually planning on doing any ultras this year as far as races go, but it's quite hard, as you know, to stay away from them.
Yeah, and there are only so many around right now and happening, especially as well.
Yeah,
Um, so 200K for us here in America is 124 miles, I
okay,
believe that's correct.
that
And you
sounds
kind
about
of
right.
described the a bit of the how the river works. I'm a little curious. Can you fill in some gaps on my knowledge and give a little bit of an overview of the Thames, the course in general, and how it works? Because I believe it finishes near the edge of London. That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely. So 200 kilometers it's the non-tidal part of the River Thames. So the kind of the finish of the race in Teddington is a lock that beyond that lock it's then tidal. So it's 200 kilometers, and it starts in the Cotswolds. Very beautiful, quaint kind of English countryside. If you
Hmm.
think of like little stone bridges and lovely little houses and lots of farmland and thatched cottages. It's to help trying to paint the picture.
Yeah.
And at that point, it starts in a place called Leckdale on Thames. The race, and the river at that point is fairly narrow. It's fairly twisty and windy.
Hmm.
Um, it's a far cry from central London, um,
Hmm.
and it's basically lock after lock after lock after lock all the way down until you reach the Teddington Lock, which is the tidal part of the Thames. And as the river goes on, it gradually gets wider and it starts flowing through some cities like Reading. Um, we go through Windsor, go underneath Windsor Castle. So it
Wow.
turns from this, for the first 20, 30 kilometres, you might see one or two canal boats,
Yeah.
people out on some canoes and kayaks. But then gradually the river gets bigger, and then uh, we go through the through Oxford, Cambridge, where they do the boat racing,
Hmm.
It's some really famous and well-known places en route. So it's a really interesting. You see so much
Hmm.
of what we have to offer along that 200 kilometres. So yeah, it's 200 kilometres from Leckdale to Teddington Lock. It has 44 locks, and now that is uh, the killer of this race, or the interesting thing I think that makes it a little bit different to perhaps races like the 11 cities in Holland, which is a very similar, well, almost the same distance, 200 kilometres.
Okay.
Now, for those of you who don't know what locks are, it's how they control the level of
Right.
water that's running downstream. So, to get boats and canal boats up and down. So we're going downstream.
Okay.
This time of year, there's not really much flow. In the winter, you can get flow. The
Okay.
runoff from the rain. There's very little. And effectively, these locks, we don't go through them on kayaks, canoes, and paddleboards. We go round them.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so you
Oh,
get
you're
out.
portaging.
You're portaging basically through all of
Hmm.
them. Now, the first few locks, they have a canoe portage. It's like nice low, little bit of wood and little grass bank, and maybe a 200-meter walk around, and you're back in the water again. But as you get nearer London, some of these locks get bigger and bigger, and this is where the challenge comes.
Right.
When we get into talking about the race itself, some of these we're carrying like hardboards,
Yeah.
hollow cardboards, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the locks, they weren't paddleboarding wasn't around when these locks were built, so
Right.
they're not designed to have portaging in craft such as paddleboards, and
Yeah.
from little simple things like gates, with like trying to carry a board through a gate where you've got a spring-loaded handle, and or you've got
Wow.
brick walls and you've got steps, and then you've got metal edges, and then you've got some put-ins which are 3-4 foot down from the edge, so you're having to you know, drop your paddleboard into the water, then kind of get yourself down 3 or 4 foot, and on another lock you might have to get yourself out 3 or 4 foot. There's ladders, but like as you get tired on the race, that's where you can make mistakes. I
Hmm.
saw a K2, two girls in a K2 fall in trying to get out. Your hands carrying board.
Yeah.
A board that starts feels like 10 kilograms on the first few locks. Towards the end, feels like 200 kilograms. um,
Absolutely. Yeah. So
so
I'm
it's a
go ahead.
sorry, go no go.
So I'm curious. I mean, that's an incredible amount of locks. Thinking about it, I mean, we're used to locks like on the Mississippi River, where it's a huge, large body of water that are taking barges right down the river, and the Thames is going to be a much small. I mean, obviously larger at the end, but generally a much smaller. Are you having like you've described a little bit? Are you taking your craft like up a ladder out and then around and down a ladder, or some areas where it's just kind of grassy or
So everyone's different. They're all slightly different,
yeah.
and I think this is where anyone looking at doing the race next year, it's like you can do your research and kind of do a lot. There's a lot of videos online of the locks. The organisers this year they had about the first 15 locks on YouTube, and I think they're planning next year to have all of them on there,
Hmm.
because like I said at the beginning, the river's narrower, the water level changes the locks are dealing with is not so great. Um, they're kind of this portages for canoes and kayaks. So you might have a nice low wooden get out where you can effectively just step out, up a grass
Hmm.
bank, a nice wide pathway,
Hmm.
down and back in the same at the other end. But then some of the other locks, you're approaching and it's 4 foot above you that you've got to get out, and there is a ladder, but then you've got to climb that ladder and pull your board up, and all the gear you're taking with you, or your hydration, your water, or the emergency safety gear you have to have on you for the race. And then when you get it out of the water, you're then having to walk along a concrete walkway. There's people, there's dogs, there's cyclists, there's gates that are shut and need opening on springs,
Wow.
and then there's and it's narrow, and you're trying to walk sideways, and some of these holding a board, and trying to squeeze through little areas, and all it takes is a knocking a fin or putting, the risks are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more the race goes on and the more tired you get, the kind of like the more they come into play. And then
Yeah.
like on the other side, if you're lucky, there's a nice grassy bank down, and a short drop, and some of the locks is much bigger. So
Wow.
it's varied, and then when you add in the nighttime section into that, which I'm sure we'll talk about, it gets even more funky.
Yeah, yeah, we'll touch on the locks a little bit more, but that's definitely a unique part of the event that I don't think I've heard of from any other one that's organized. So very, very different, very interesting, very unique. I wanted to have a little. I was a little curious about the river itself. Is that used? Do people typically kayak down that? Do people like? Is that like a dirty body of water? Is it used for transport? What is it mainly used
Yeah.
for in purpose?
So I think the further you get close, well, the closer you get to London, the more it's used for. So, well, at the beginning, it's pretty much all leisure.
Okay.
So it's canoes, kayaks,
Okay.
and barges, as in like holiday boats.
Okay.
Like canal boats for holidays.
Got it.
It's a very nice part of the world to travel in and have a holiday. A lot of fishermen on the
Okay.
banks, leisure fishing. And as you get closer to London, you have more leisure craft, so kind of like the sort of larger boats, day boats, little engines on the back with people hiring them for a day to go up and down. It's you have sailing boats in some parts, so it gets wider. You
Oh
have
wow.
sailing boats, and as you get in central London, and you get into areas, you've got the actual racing. So you've got, forgive me, I'm not a kayak or canoe racer, but like
Sure.
like the Oxford Cambridge boat races, the long sculls with like 8 people in. You've got
Rowing.
them training. You've got the rowing. The rowing. There we go.
You know, it's
You've got
so
the
funny
rowers
because
going.
everything here in America, like, oh, you went rowing. I'm like, no, like everything it's paddling and rowing, but everybody thinks you're a
Yeah,
rower. It's just, I don't know, it's an
yeah,
American thing,
yeah.
anyways.
I know. So you go through Henley, which is one of the most famous stretches of water where they do the boat racing,
Hmm.
and you're on that sharing that with some very well trained teams training on there, and it's so. And then closer you get to London, it gets busier and busier and busier.
Yeah.
Um, there's not really, I say, working traffic. I mean, obviously we're on it a weekend, so it's all leisure. It's just getting busier and busier leisure. In answer to your question about swimming, yes, you may see people bobbing around near the source. Would I want to? Probably not.
Your skin's not going to melt off, basically, but you wouldn't want to if you
Yeah.
didn't have to.
No,
Okay.
no,
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, very historic part of that country, and I think everyone's kind of heard it passing at least.
Yeah. I mean, and like going past Windsor Castle, I mean, you're literally
Yeah.
right under the castle.
I mean, that's
It's awesome. I live an hour and a half from
oh
parts of
cool.
the river, but even I couldn't help look around and be like, wow, this is really cool. So it must be great for people coming over or from further afield to. I think it's an amazing way to see part of the UK and London.
Yeah, that would be a great kind of holiday thing to do as a at least if you're
Uh,
coming from America, at least my
yeah, yeah.
perspective. Is that so with this event, did you go ahead and train for it all? Have you been on that river? Have you done sections of it? Is it something that people kind of go like, oh, I'm gonna go train on the Thames?
So it's interesting. So generally, the Thames is used quite a lot by people for paddleboarding. So there's quite a
Oh,
few
okay.
clubs
Okay.
and schools along parts of the Thames. It is non because it's non-tidal. So obviously in the winter there is some flow. But generally it's a nice place to paddle. There's plenty of options for pubs and restaurants and
Hmm.
parking and all sorts. There's lots of options. So yeah, I mean the river itself is used a lot for paddling. Personally wise, even though it's quite on my doorstep, it's not something that I've paddled on hardly. Well, I say I hadn't paddled on it until last year,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah.
Um, just because of I've got some other rivers near me when I was training for the Yukon 1000, some rivers with no locks that I could
Yeah,
go and
that's a
do
big deal.
longer sessions on. So, but where it started is interestingly back in 2022 when I was training for the Yukon 1000, looking at different ways to challenge myself and paddles. And there's a few paddlers were like, oh, there's a world record for the Thames
Hmm.
that's
Oh
been
yeah.
done on a paddleboard back in 2017, and the
Oh.
world record at that time was 65 hours.
Oh wow. Okay.
And we were like, there's a blog post online from the guy that did it, and he camped over one night. So like it's. And we
Sure.
kind of joked. There's quite a few of us joked about like at some point someone needs to go out and just put that at a more realistic
Right.
target. So back in 2022, and I was training for the 1000, I thought, do you know what? Maybe I'll go and do the Guinness record and try and give that one a go.
Oh, it's a Guinness
So I
record.
applied. Yeah, it's a Guinness World Record,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
65 hours. So So I applied for it back in 2022. I don't know how much you know about world records, but like it's not as simple. It's kind of
It's
the
difficult
actual
to
doing
do the whole process, right?
the thing is actually probably easier than applying and
Yeah.
proving you've done the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now, because it exists as a record, it's a little bit easier because they can say, well, this is what it was. These are the guidelines.
Oh, okay.
So they sent me back a pack and they said, like, here's your reference number. Here's what we need from you. Here's the conditions it must be done under.
Hmm.
And then anyway, life got in the way and I didn't do it in the end. But then last year in the final prep training for the Yukon 1000, myself and Mark Salter, an amazing endurance athlete from the UK, has done some incredible things. We both decided to go out and train together, and we thought, well, let's go and do a couple of days on the Thames.
Hmm.
So we went and did a 2 day paddle on the Thames. So we did about 140k of the river over just 2 days. We kind of broke it into a 70 and a 7, well, 270s, I think, pretty much. So that was my first actual time paddling on the Thames, um, and but that gave me some great kind of like feeling for how fast you could do it because we
Hmm.
did, although we split it over 2 days, we did that 135 140 in about 20 hours, 21 hours.
Hmm.
And we weren't really, we were pushing it, but we weren't racing it.
Hmm.
So I always knew that, like, this could, it would be easy to break the record. And actually, within the paddling community, particularly when this race was coming out, there's a lot of people that said wasn't possible on a paddleboard within the 34-hour cutoff that this race had. But I was like, well, we did 20 hours for 3/4 of it. The 11 cities in Holland is the same distance. That has a 34-hour cutoff, and admittedly, it hasn't got locks, but it has huge lakes and lots of wind. So there's different things and things that affect. So that was really my experience of the Thames. And then this year, as I said, this year was my year off. I did the 1,000 last year.
Yeah.
I did the SUP 11 cities non-stop last year, like
Yeah.
6 weeks after the 1,000.
Wow.
And this year was like, I'm actually going to get back to enjoying my paddling. I was enjoying it anyway,
Right.
but just take the stress away from training, and just actually have fun training and
Yeah.
just kind of like just see what happened. And so I didn't have anything planned. I was like, I didn't have any
Yeah.
races planned. I was going to go out, maybe do some overnight expeditions with some friends and stuff like that. But then, as I said, this race come up, and I was just, I don't know, I just needed some. It just felt right. I was like, I looked in the record a couple of years ago. Last year went and did it. This year come up and thought, oh, and it's all organised. You've got, and then they've got 5 checkpoints. They've got, it's in a race environment organised by someone that knows exactly what they're doing. So I was like, this would be really interesting, and it's an inaugural race. It'd be great to be part of that first group of paddlers or stand-up paddleboarders going out to give it a go. And so just a few weeks before I put the application form in, and in answer to your question, didn't train specifically, but I mean, I train. I'm always doing something. So
Yeah.
the base is there.
Yeah.
If I was going to compete, as in to place, then yeah, of course, I would have wanted to build into it a little bit more. But I knew that I could do it. It was a case of just grinding it out.
Yeah, I always like having that kind of mindset going into the race, basically kind of the structure you described. Well, let's get a little bit more into race day now. I was watching the live
Mm.
stream and noticed how rainy it was, and I'm like, oh, that's typical UK, I guess. What was that like? Was it windy? And I also noticed, you had a fair amount of stand-up paddlers. I don't know how many people were with you as well at that start line.
I think we had. I think there was something like. Don't quote me on this because but I think there was something like 12 stand-up
Okay.
paddle boarders. I think.
Okay. Quite a
Um,
bit.
uh, yeah, so it was a good turnout for the first inaugural one.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, I mean, being August in the UK, generally rain is on the cards. It's
Yeah.
for the middle of summer, it's there. So we had torrential rain on the
Oof.
Saturday,
Wow.
which, to be honest, I quite enjoy because it's like you know once you're paddling, you forget all about it. Some people they get put off by it. It kind of puts them out, and actually, the more things I think are going, it's another one of those hurdles to overcome. So having the right plan for what you're going to wear and having a change of clothes when you dry out. You look at the forecast. We were due, torrential rain from like 10 in the morning till about 6 in the evening, and then a lovely, calm, sunny evening and a very calm night.
Hmm.
Clear skies, moonlight. Not cold. So you kind of knew you had to get through that section and then be ready for the night section. So yeah, we had heavy rain. Some people hate it. I'm fine with it. And all the paddleboarders set off at 10 o'clock. They set us off 4 hours earlier than the canoes and kayaks.
That was my question. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a 30-hour cut off for canoes and kayaks and a 34-hour for
Oh,
SUP,
got it. I saw
basically.
that 34. I was like, okay.
Yeah, so that was the idea there. So and the race started at 10 o'clock. Off we went. And again, I guess it depends on the kind of person you are. I like to paddle on my own on ultras.
Yeah,
I like to find, I kind of know the pace that I want to paddle at.
sure.
I've learned the hard way of not getting caught up in a race with other people.
Yep. Yep.
I think we've all been there. If you've done
Yep.
any kind of ultra, be it running or paddling as well, it's like
Yep.
I've learned the hard way that I do my race my way, and what
Yep.
will be will be.
It's very easy
Um,
to go off that plan. Very easy.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, the first 10 kilometers are going to be very different in 200 kilometers time. And I think
Hmm.
that's really interesting. I think that kind of mindset and mentality is something I like to try and help new paddlers doing ultras with, is like understanding the different phases of a race of that length and learning to
Yeah.
the self-talk around, look, because your heart rate goes up, you're off that line, you think, I'm 3 kilometers in, why am I getting stressed? I've got another 197 kilometers,
Yeah.
and you start looking at everyone else and you think, well, as we saw SUP 11 cities this weekend, strong paddlers drop out 20 kilometers from the end.
Yeah.
So a lot can happen. So yeah, so I like to find a bit of space, find a pace I'm comfortable with, and then just try and you know just ease into it and get into it and enjoy it. Yeah, and see where it goes.
Where did you find yourself in the pack applying your own pace in that first portion during the
So,
day?
so in the day in the front three, so in the top three for pretty much the whole race.
Okay.
Um, and this was the first and second place on the race. So Chris Davison and Gavin Simmons, two amazing endurance paddlers I've come across at SUP 11 cities and SUP 12 and various races. They kind of set off together. They went off quite. They don't really know each other, and they went off quite fast off the bat. And I was like, well, I'm not going to stick. I'm going to. I said to my land support, which you don't have to have, but I had land support, and I
Yeah.
was like, I was like, tell me when they're more than 3 or 4 kilometers ahead of me, because you got trackers on. So I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to know, but like when they start pushing beyond 3 or 4 kilometers, let me know. Other than that, just
Sure.
I'm happy. So for the first few kilometers, they were pretty much in eyesight for most of it, and I was watching them, and it was quite interesting because they were drafting, and I don't think either wanted to be with the other one, but they were kind of like push. And I was watching them, and I was like, in my head, and like
Conflicted.
if one of them went to get an energy gel, I saw Chris. I saw him go into his pocket, and he went to get a gel. And as he put the gel in, I saw Gavin quickly put a few faster strokes in,
Oh,
and I
wow.
saw,
That's
and I
really
was,
competitive
yeah,
very early.
and we're talking like 3 or 4K in here. We're
Oh,
talking,
that's bad.
and
That's bad
and then I
news.
then I saw Chris quickly put his
Uh,
wrapper in somewhere and try and get back up again
oof.
because he didn't want him to pull away. So I was like, well, I'm just going to sit and let them two basically tire each other out,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
and again, going back to the have a game plan, I was like, no, just
Yeah.
ignore what they're doing. But, I say that, but Chris and Gavin are also incredibly
Yeah.
experienced. So, I also knew that they were thinking, they had a plan as well. So,
Sure.
I basically was in third for the whole race until the very, very, very end, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I didn't see anyone really after that. So
Oh, wow.
they pulled ahead. They pulled ahead they're probably about 3 or 4K ahead for
Okay.
pretty much most of the race. The really fast K2s and K1s caught us, through the night. So that's probably the only time I saw anyone else on the
Oh,
race
okay.
passing. Didn't see any other paddleboarders. And yeah, and I just kind of kept my pace and was very happy with that. But the locks are what would slow you down, and that's the tough bit because you're trying to keep your average up, but then the locks you could see a pace tumbling on some of them. I got lost in a couple of locks, which really hit me hard. And I know you should never think of the what ifs or if onlys. But like there was one lock in the night that I missed totally, which I'll tell you about. And I ended up doing 3.5 kilometers more in distance trying to find it. Um,
Yeah.
there was another lock where I missed the putback in, and I actually ended up walking down a country path behind some. I could see the river on the other side of this, just like drop, and it was a case of like I realised I'd gone wrong, but I'd already walked about 500 meters further down, and there's a few things I messed up on.
Yeah.
That like, but I'm sure it happens. You know, there's things that other people are messing up on as well. Other teams are getting lost and stuff. Which is, it sounds weird saying you miss a lock on a river.
Right.
Um,
That's actually my
but
question.
so
Like, if you have just the river, how are,
okay, so daytime not a problem. You know,
yeah.
you approach a lock, you can hear the weir, you can see the weir.
Yeah.
You know roughly it's around. I mean, I had my watch and I had my GPS on here with the route, but like you know, I wasn't zoomed in that close. Generally in the daytime, you can see you can see the big wooden gates of a
Sure.
lock, and you know, you come up to it and you're trying to work out is it a get out left or right. You're looking hopefully for a nice portage point or something. You go around it back in, but there's a couple of locks, two or three locks, I'd say, that are just not where you would expect them to be on the river. And when I say that, like, and this happened at night. Now,
Yeah.
at night, the river's not used at night, so the locks are closed. The locks aren't open. It's
Okay.
dark. You're in the country. You're in the countryside, so they're not
Yeah.
like lit up, and there's no navigation lights really. There's generally a sign that says lock and an arrow, which half of them were behind trees or obscured. So, and at night you're sort of paddling along, and we were using moonlight generally. So you've
Yeah, I was
got
going
a
to ask you,
small.
so you're just doing by moonlight, you're not using any extra lights or anything like that?
No, so you have to have a. We had to have a light on the board
Okay.
just for to be seen.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but like, you know, as I found, I have it at the back of the board,
Yeah.
dimmed as much as I possibly can. Don't worry, you know, I have a red light on my head
Yeah.
turned off,
Yeah. Okay.
and a green, yeah. So, but using the moonlight, but then you kind of, I was paddling along and you could hear the weir. So you know you're approaching a lock. So normally I'll turn the red light on quickly, have a little look around. Ah, there's the weir, cool. And then you're looking around to see either a sign for a lock or a lock. And there's this one lock I kind of paddled and I kept going and kept going. And I was like, you know, the weir went out of earshot. And I was like, you know, but the river was still going. But then I suddenly found myself in a boatyard. It's a dead end boatyard. You know, must turn round back to the weir, turn back round again.
Yeah.
And looking around, went off on a different angle, ended up down into a very posh boating housing estate. Very nice posh boats. Another dead end, you know, and
Yeah.
like, and you're getting tired now, and you're getting
Yeah.
frustrated because all that effort you put in, and all of a sudden I'm seeing that, you know, I've lost half an hour.
Hmm.
You know, I've gone back and forth. Turns out the lock in daylight you would see it as clear as day, but it was like
Sure.
a right. The lock was on a right hand bend. It was literally not. You're going down the river, and straight ahead is all the boatyards and housing,
Yeah.
and the lock was just to the
Sure.
right. At
Yeah.
night, just missed it. You know, I know I
Yeah.
wasn't the. I think I was the only paddleboarder, but I know some other K2s and that didn't miss it. I did hear that Chris and Gavin were about to miss it, and they, as luck had it, I think a canoe or kayak went past them, and they just followed them to the lock. So you never know. You know, sometimes you get lucky. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think I ended up doing that 204. Well, I did end up doing 204 kilometers overall. So I did about 4 kilometers extra.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that was quite frustrating. It's quite frustrating.
And
Um,
it's a lot of that, like you said, it's so, it's so clear in the day, but when that exhaustion adds up and the mental fatigue, all of those things combining together, anything
yeah,
extra is really difficult. Even with the mental, obviously the mental part. Do you have any mental strategies you use for that kind of situation? Because I've been there a lot and I know exactly what that feels like.
yeah. So up until this race, I used to deal with that kind of stuff really badly. I'm very
Yeah,
competitive with
yeah,
myself as well, as in I beat myself up
sure.
about things, and I was annoyed. You know, I'd have been very annoyed that like, you know, why didn't I use the mapping more? I should have used my watch, trusted the watch more. I should have done more research on the locks. I should have maybe, you know, that's what I would normally be like. But actually, I've done some work with a friend of mine who's a sports psychologist.
Mm,
He was a sports psychologist for the Premier League football team, gone freelance. And actually, the week before, I was like, look, Zach, you know, like I often struggle with these kind of things in races. You know, I overthink things. I beat myself up. I get caught up. And he gave me some really useful guides and things to think about. Far too much to go into in one call here, but
sure, sure,
one of the
sure,
things
sure.
that like, one of the things that like is like, you know, it's kind of like it just is. You know, it's not bad or good. It just happened. So like,
Right.
I can't undo it. I can't undo it.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
you know, that's one of the things. You know, he's like, is you know, and he was like, what I really liked is one of the visualizations. I actually printed this out and stuck it on my board. He said, think of a circle and all these little thoughts that go through your head. Thoughts aren't fact for a start. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because you think it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, if it's useful, put it in the circle. If it's not useful, put it out the
Oh, that's a
circle.
good
So
one.
like, I mean, it worked for me. That the fact that like I've gone wrong, is it useful? The fact that I've gone wrong? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Can I do anything about it? No, I can't. Then I just
Throw
move
it
on
away.
because I can waste so much more energy worrying about it and getting angry about it.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm a little bit peed about it, but like, I couldn't
Yeah.
change it. And so I think there's loads of little bits there. And I think that's
Yeah.
something I'm going to do more of for
Yeah.
races, speak with him. I think I spent a lot of time on the physical side, a lot of time on the nutrition side,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously building the experience. And I think the last kind of like thing that I'm going to focus on now is going to be I think my mindset's good, but the tips and techniques of speaking to someone like a sports psychologist, I think there's a lot that can be gleaned in that for these kind of things, and it definitely worked for this race.
Yeah, that is a huge aspect that I think we all can take pointers and improve upon, especially in the ultra distance world. I know that you used a hardboard, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of thinking about that in the locks and going around those, and I'm imagining how far are on average would you say the distance to navigate around one is?
Well, some of the shorter ones are maybe 200-300 meters,
Okay, I just think
but
two.
like, there's a couple that are like 800 meters, quite
Oh
far.
wow. So like, two
Yeah,
laps around track. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe 400. Maybe and probably it felt like 800 meters when it was lock 38 and you're carrying a hardboard.
So you have
But
a
then,
hard
yes,
board.
yeah. So
And
I have a
how are you
hardboard, and
having extra ropes or anything on that board, or how did you rig that
so
out to do that?
what I did, obviously, I had a normal leash, this a coiled leash, a quick release to my leash point down by my feet. But then I actually adapted a neoprene strap that I brought off Amazon that would normally go onto like a briefcase. Um,
Huh.
and I had some D rings I
Yeah.
attached onto my board. So I actually created
Yeah. Yep.
basically a shoulder holder
Yeah.
that didn't have to go around the board. That I could just literally, if I wanted to take the weight off my hands.
Yeah.
And also, it doubled up as a great way to be able to pull the board out of the water when it was far
Sure.
down. So we've all been there when you're trying to grab your coiled leash and you're pulling this thing and it's just getting longer and longer and
Yeah. Yeah.
stretched
Yeah.
out and
Yeah.
stretched out. So actually, that was actually, to be honest, I didn't use the shoulder. I didn't use it over the shoulder actually that much in the end because it was so narrow that it was quite hard to walk with the board still with my body and the board. But it paid for well, the being able to use it to lean down and lift the board out of the water really helped on that. Other kit, so you've got 5 checkpoints, so you haven't got to take too much gear with you. The checkpoints are between 27.5 kilometers and 34
Okay.
kilometers apart.
All right.
So
Not too bad.
4 to 6 hours paddling. You can
Okay.
take that amount of water and food if you're clever about how you do it with you,
Hmm. Okay.
and then restock.
Yeah.
When you get there, which is what I did. But having to tie down bags, so when you don't want to be unclipping stuff and bags and having to reload and reclip. So
Yeah.
trying to find a quick and easy way to get out at a lock and get back in at a lock without having to faff too much was really important as well.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that setup. When you said about the deer rings and the strap from doing part of the safari, I had to come up with some situations where there was long portages around dams and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, I did something pretty similar. How much weight do you think additionally was on your board? Because obviously water is probably maybe the heaviest thing, I
Yeah, so
imagine.
water, so like 2.5, 3 liters of water, so two,
Okay.
3 kilograms of that. With some food, I reckon, and the safety gear was minimal. A change of a dry set of clothes was obviously mandatory, and some lighting. Beyond that, it's what I wanted. So a little small medical kit. And the other thing as well is I was still going to log this as a Guinness attempt, a Guinness World Record
Oh,
attempt. I
okay.
thought because I had the application there, and it was open, and I had all the stuff. So basically, again, going back to with Guinness, they're like, look, you can't draft, so you can't have any outside assistance. So no drafting's allowed.
Hmm.
No one can touch your board or help you at the locks. So they can't carry it. So they can't carry it around. They can
Sure.
open gates for you, but they can't touch anything. It's got to be a stock board. Um,
Oh, okay.
and quite importantly, you have to film yourself 2 minutes, a minimum of 2 minutes every hour. Um, so if you think about the logistics of that, so I was like and you have to have witness statements throughout the race, timekeeper
Yeah.
statements, start and finish.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I kind of done all the paperwork for it. And I thought, well, I'm on the race, and I spoke to the organisers, and they were like, well, we've got timekeepers at both ends anyway, so they can do
Hmm.
that. You've got 5 checkpoints, so they all fill out the witness statements.
Hmm.
So all I had to do was not draft. So luckily, I didn't
Yeah.
see anyone anyway. So
Yeah.
and make sure So I didn't draft. There's a few points that the locks in central London where people are, oh, can I carry your board for you? Pass me,
Like, no,
just
don't touch my
general.
board.
Well, I'm like getting off, and
Get
I'm
on my
like, thank
board.
you very much. Yeah, but like I do not want to. And like, there's one bit actually, I used the wrong fin. On the river, we shouldn't expect any weed. You shouldn't need a weed fin this time of year. So
Yeah.
I had a fin with quite a steep rake,
Sure.
and a few of us had the experience. I caught quite a lot of weed, and I had my river fin in my kit bag with my checkpoint, but I couldn't remember on the Guinness guidelines whether I was allowed to swap out mid. So I was like, no, I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to swap out a fin.
Oh
I'll just
yeah.
carry on as I
Just
am
yeah.
because I couldn't remember any anyway. So, but yeah. So in answer to your question about gear on the board, the difficult thing was the GoPro. So I was like,
Oh,
I've got to keep this thing powered. I've got
sure.
to remember to film myself for a minimum of 2 minutes every hour. So at whatever point. So and actually that kept me busy, on the right, and
Yeah.
like so yeah, power banks and cables and keeping power banks waterproofed and
Oh my
all that
goodness.
sort of stuff. And then remembering to do 2 minutes at least every hour for
That's so a good
yeah,
amount. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good yeah. You think so I got all that together, and and like so I was doing that as well. So yeah, so the board like was cabled up, cameras, lights, and all sorts, and then walking through brick um, portages where one knock and you can smash a GoPro mount off and it's done. It's kind of yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
Sorry, I had my other thing lined up here.
No, you
Give
good?
me a second.
Yeah, yeah.
I had lost my train of thought. Let me bring it back a second. So did you end up actually fall actually no, I remember my question. So you said that you had to use a stock board. What board did you actually end up using? And this is just generally my own curiosity.
So yeah, no. So this was I had my one SUP, my Edge Pro
Okay.
2. I've had it for quite a few years. It's great for flat water. It's 25 and a half, but because of
Okay.
the shape
Yeah.
of the way the shape, if you know much about the one Edge Pro,
Hmm.
I think it paddles more like a 23, 24
Yeah.
because it a lot, when it's gliding, it's got great glide. I've had it for years. It's been chucked around and it's taped and repaired and all sorts. So I was kind of quite happy to
Yeah.
chuck it around, and I know it inside out. It's like standing on it's like standing on flat water. It's like I feel at home on it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not the lightest. It's not hollow. It's a little bit heavy. Yes, there's faster boards. But the fastest board, the lightest is not always the fastest board. Comfort is
Absolutely.
it was really important. Really important.
Absolutely. Did you have any nutrition difficulties along the way, kind of especially when you made some issues in the dark? I know sometimes it can be like, oh, do I have enough food now? But you said you had those checkpoints that were pretty close.
Yeah, no, I've been again, from what I've done in the past and from lessons learned, I'm pretty dialed in now. So
Yeah.
I have, I have I had 5 Ziploc bags with my support, one for each
Nice.
checkpoint. I'd planned what was in them, but enough to keep variety. Um,
Yeah.
and so I kind of like I had enough in there for the time. Precision Hydration supported and sponsored the event, but
Oh,
they
very
also
nice.
they supported me on the Yukon. So I've been very close
Oh,
to them
very
for
cool.
5, 6 years. So I know all their products. So I use all their gear anyway. So
Mm,
they sorted out all my electrolytes out. So I know exactly what I need to drink there. I know my gels, when to have them, when not to have them, and I know that I can eat a lot more real food early on in the race and then after that. So I know when to do it.
yeah.
2 or 3 days before the race, I'm already easing into it. All the things you learn the hard way. But I kind of definitely this again was did it went as I had expected it to. And I, with my support team, I'm like, here's my 5 bags for each checkpoint, and here's another bag of stuff that I don't think I'll need, but I might suddenly turn around to you and say, I want a Kit Kat chunky, or
Nice.
there's because you don't really know until you kind of get
Yeah.
there that you suddenly start craving these types of food. So it's about having them ready there,
Yeah.
having a plan.
Yeah.
Like the biggest thing when I'm helping people with ultras is like you've got to have a plan.
Hmm.
Um, if you've got to, you might not feel hungry, you might not feel thirsty, which means it's probably too late. But you've got to, little and often have a plan, have a backup plan if something doesn't quite go to plan, or you don't like that, or something's not sitting comfortably. But you've got to go in with a little bit of an idea, because that's where you see people fail at the last point. It's like, how gutted is it to do 160, 170k and then fall apart 30k from the finish because you've just not really thought about filling the tank up. You're
Yeah.
not going to drive a car around a racetrack and just there's so many analogies we can chuck in here,
Yeah.
but like yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that went the food and nutrition side went very well.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I think when it comes to ultras, it's really a an eating and drinking contest buffet kind of thing.
100%. It is. It's. I had a chat. It's like ultras are eating and
Just eating and
drinking
drinking.
contests.
Yeah.
That's it. And then yeah, it's you can keep eating, keep drinking.
Yeah.
You know,
You're good.
find your pace and keep at it. You're good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, now it's the next morning. Do you end up getting a lot of like fog or anything like that on the
Yeah.
Thames?
So there's one more thing for the night session, which is really funny. Is
Yeah, let's hear about it.
we had Reading Festival that weekend. I don't know if Reading is basically like Glastonbury. You may or may not know Glastonbury.
I've heard of this.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm a Radiohead
so
fan,
we
so
have
they always come up with that.
I got it.
That.
So basically, Reading and Leeds festivals that weekend.
Okay.
And the River Thames goes straight through the middle of Reading.
Oh
So
wow.
I went through the Reading Festival at one a.m. in the morning. So you're talking 150,000 people, and the river. So on the left hand side is all the campsites, and on the right hand side is the stages and the dance tents and the fun fair, and the fencing, obviously to stop people from breaking in, was like
Sure.
it wasn't metal solid in most places. It was like just normal grate, so people can see you. So you could you could smell the weed and the sweat about 10 kilometers before you got to
Wow,
Reading.
that's such a
You
polarized viewpoint right
uh,
there.
so you've come from the middle of the countryside. You've been paddling all through
Right.
the night. You're saying it, and all of a sudden you can hear it. You know it's coming, and then you get there. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, obviously the main bands had finished, but you can hear the dance tents going. There's a bridge that goes across the river, and there's people using it to get to and from the campsite.
Oh
And
wow.
they're all shouting and waving at you,
Like, what
and
are you
some of them are
doing?
confused. There's a guy standing in the river. You can imagine the conversation. Um, I went through. There's one bit where you've got loads of food trucks, but it's on the outside of the festival site. So I could have pulled off. It's really busy, and there's like Subway and there's like Mexican food, and I was like, I could
Oh
have.
man,
I literally
that's like
was going to pull off.
torture.
I was going to pull it off and go and get myself a Subway or something and stand in the queue with like 20 festival goers, but stand there with a paddle and a PFD, and like
And your
and
video
just
for
see.
Guinness right there. Like,
And there's my video for Guinness. Yeah,
like I
here's
did not
some
take any
witnesses.
performance enhancing drugs during this whole thing. Weed was not included. It was not my fault.
Yeah,
No.
here's some witnesses. You can trust them.
Oh yeah.
Um, so that was great going through Reading, and actually that made that 20k kind of thing go so quick. It was just
Yeah.
amazing looking at it. It was incredible. And here in a dance tent, and in the morning, sun come up, beautiful sunrise, but very misty again, which can make it a little bit tricky. But luckily, we're at a part of the river where it's wide enough and there's enough on the sides to kind of find your kind of bearings. By this point, there's not too much in the water to worry about with weeds and stuff that we had earlier on. So it was a beautiful sunrise, really. There was no wind at that point. Um, I think anyone that's done an all night for an ultra, that when that sun first breaks through,
Oh yeah.
oh, what a feeling! It lifts you again.
Yeah.
I like to quickly change when the sun's properly out again. Do another quick change of clothes, maybe just
Yeah.
change the top or something. Sometimes it's just
Mental.
nice to feel a little bit different. Just quickly, not let you stop. Just go to your knees. Just switch your top over. Change your hat or do something just to kind of signal the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then you're then at that point you're in this kind of like race to the finish. The longer it takes, the busier the river's going to get. It's a Sunday, a bank holiday weekend, and
Okay.
and to be honest, I would have preferred to have rain again,
Yeah.
because it would
Yeah.
keep everyone off. It would keep people off the river. But you're now getting to the really busy parts of the London. You're getting to Windsor. You're going through Henley. The locks are getting bigger. There's a lot more people and traffic on the locks. Walking around and cyclists, and it's just getting more. Just when you're tired, it's getting more complicated. And then the wind come, and it's like I'm always like on an ultra when it's good, enjoy those moments, but always remember that something's going to come around and kick you in the nuts. And then as soon as it's kicked you in the nuts, it'll be good again at some point. So you're
Yeah.
enjoying the sunrise, you're enjoying that bit of paddling, you're enjoying the peace as the sun comes up, but you're always like, enjoy it while it lasts, because at some point something's going to kick me in the nuts.
Yeah.
And there was two things. My fin, I nearly lost a fin where I've been doing the portages, and that the screw had come loose, and I hadn't noticed. And it was just I was just about to put the board in the water, and I just happened to notice it was just hanging down without the screw
Oh
in.
man.
So luckily managed to sort that out. And then the other thing was the wind. And now we knew we were expecting wind. And to be honest, the way the river is shaped
Yeah.
towards the end, it was going to be with us more than it was going to be against us,
Okay.
which was good. But
Yeah.
when it was against us, it was relentless. And then when it was with us, it was almost downwinding. Proper you standing up as tall as you possibly could to catch any kind of,
Yeah.
and but then the boat traffic, you've got people in higher boats that just like they're not slowing down when they come past you,
Yeah, it's
and
frustrating.
they're cutting across. They're all like, we've all
All
been
that
there,
wake.
well, yeah, we've,
You're tired.
you're tired,
Like, how many
exactly. It's
locks
the
have I
time.
gone through? Can you give me a break?
Yeah, yeah.
Good
So
grief.
that's kind of like the last bit there, and it's just that last slog to the finish line, really. And I think that's where, like, so my support team has said, look, even after I messed up in the night, I was still only 5 or 6K behind Chris and Gavin. But
Nice.
then I was like, you're like, okay. But then when the last 20, 30K, you're like, I can't really, I'm not going to go too much quicker. So unless one of them makes a mistake or bails, this is how it's going to be. Um, and then the last, so I settled thinking, okay, third is great. On for like a sub 32 hour time. Um, this is good. And then I was going through a lock, probably about 7K from the finish, and I'd gone round the lock, and I put the board in. I was paddling, and I quickly just turned round to make sure nothing was caught, and I saw Jan, who was on an inflatable SUP, an amazing guy, and he just caught me sort of 7K from the end on his
Uh,
inflatable SUP. And again, you start beating yourself up. If I
I
hadn't
know
made
that
those
feeling.
mistakes in the night, if I hadn't made those mistakes in the night, I'd have
Yeah,
been
that's
like,
hard. That's so
four or
hard.
five k forever. But at the same time,
Yeah.
you don't know what anyone else has gone through as well. Everyone's had their own battles, so you can't. Again, going back to the psychology, it's like you can't beat yourself up because
Yeah.
you don't know. Yang could have gone 10K off track, or you don't know. But
Sure.
it was one of those things of like, okay. And then I think that's probably the time where I dug deepest and thought, you know, it doesn't make any difference. It is what it is. Like, and he was paddling strong, and I think what was great there. So I stayed with him for a few locks. We had a little bit of chat. But I think this is what's interesting because where he was obviously gaining, and as well as being a great paddler, was
Hmm.
when he got to the
That's
locks
what I was
with an
thinking.
inflatable.
The inflatable.
He
Yeah.
was just hoofing it out and chucking it around and chucking it
Doesn't
in, and
matter.
off he went.
Whatever. Just throw it over.
Ah, and and don't get me wrong, he was treating it with
Sure.
respect, but there's a lot you can do with
Sure.
a 14-foot inflatable.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a race inflatable. It was and there's me with this hardboard that by now I think I've had a hairline crack in my by my fin box because the board actually weighs a couple of kilograms more when I got back than it did when I started. But it
Yeah.
feels so heavy and you're bashing around. So yeah, so bless him. So I finished a few minutes after him in the end. But I think for me the main goal was for the Guinness record, you kind of don't the Thames 200. It goes down to the final lock and turns round and comes back about 800 meters to the finish line to
Okay.
make it exactly 200 kilometers.
Hmm.
Um, so you don't go right to the lock, but for Guinness, you have to go right to the lock, go underneath this bridge and touch the wooden lock and stop your timer there. So I had my timekeeper and support crew meet me at the lock. So I kind of paddled down to that lock, kind of missed the turnaround spot and went further, got to the lock, touched the wood and then stopped my watch there. And then the 800 meter paddle back up, I just kind of just, you know, where that comes well. So yeah, and I come in just behind Yan, that's sort of 7 or 8 minutes behind Yan, which is incredible. Still, I mean, for people that said it can't be possible to do a sub 34 hours on a paddleboard, to have Yan come in at 31 and a half, 31:45 on an inflatable. I think I can't, if there was 12 starters or whatever it was, but only the four of us finished.
Oh, okay.
And I
Wow.
think the hats off. So Gavin Simmons, so he finished in 29 hours, 19 minutes and 56 seconds, which
Okay.
is incredible. So a sub, and then Chris was 29 hours 25, so 6 minutes behind
Close.
him.
Close.
So I think what happened is those two stayed. Well, I think they stayed with each other until about the last 10k,
Yeah.
which I think probably annoyed them. But well, I think it probably annoyed one more than it annoyed the other. And then Gavin, obviously, I think it just shows the level of skill those guys had, that they did
Yeah.
hold out for the whole
Yeah.
race until the last. They knew what they were playing at, and I think it's amazing that so like Gavin set a time of 29:19, Chris 29:25, and then Jan was 32, and I was 32:09. And that was for a group of us that they said couldn't be not possible under 34 hours.
You did it.
So I think, yeah. So there we go. And I think that's a testament, and hopefully we'll see a lot more paddlers giving it a go next year.
So you actually have to go past the finish line and then back? Is that how that worked you were describing?
Yeah. So for the race to make it exactly 200
Yeah.
kilometers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you go down to the lock
Yeah,
and come
yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about 800
Yeah.
meters back to the finish line. Yeah.
So what happens with the Guinness right now? How does that can you
So it's interesting. So Guinness, I've got all the evidence together now. So all the witness statements,
yeah.
all the video evidence. You know, I think the key thing I want to do is not take away from the other the record. The FKT, the fastest known time is now Gavin Simmons 29:19.
Right, but you could have the
But
Guinness.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's interesting because I never want to take away from
Sure.
the but of course it's done under slightly different conditions. Like the drafting.
Yeah.
I'm sure Gavin and Chris drafted for
Sure.
180k or whatever. But it's
Yeah.
kind of irrelevant. And the video evidence, stopping
Yeah.
doing the video evidence. So
Takes a lot of time.
it's like I don't want to take anything away from Gavin, Chris, or Jan in this race. But at the same time, I've got the evidence there. It needs to not be 65 hours. So I'll
Yeah.
submit the evidence in, get it done, get it down to, I think the record, I did it in 31:45, I think it was to the thing.
Wow.
Set it at a more realistic or hopefully a nice
Yeah.
target. And then my goal is then to say to anyone else, including Gavin and Chris, I will support you from a Guinness point
Oh,
of view if
wow.
you want to go out and set, because I know how to do all the evidence. I know all the paperwork. I know how to
Yeah.
film all the stuff. Let's keep that record tumbling down. Mark Salter wants to do it. Some people aren't interested in records. I'm not really, to be honest. And it's like one of those things, but like, it'd be nice to get it, put it at a more realistic level. But I'm so keen not to take anything away from the other, because the fastest known time, on a paddleboard is Gavin at 29:19.
Yeah. I mean, I know that from hearing about other people's Guinness records where it's almost like a half of it's like understanding the process and the paperwork
Oh,
and all the documenting, well, like you said, and all those extra things that you need to do that slow you down. So it still must be neat to have when it all follows through at the end to have that certificate at the end that in your
yeah, it'd be cool.
lifetime you
Yeah,
did this thing, right? Or I don't know if it's in a
yeah,
book or what have you, or the website at
yeah,
least,
yeah.
right?
You go to the website, you might get in the book. It's cool. I mean, it's like, I'm not really I'm not. Some people go out chasing
Sure.
records.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me, it was because I thought about it back in 2022 as part of my Yukon training. It's quite nice to close a chapter.
Yeah.
I think is what I'm saying. It's like
Yeah.
I don't like leaving open ends.
Yeah.
It's like I went out, I applied for ad thing, did the evidence, got it done. I know many people that can do it a lot quicker, and I'm there to help them. If they want to do it, they
Yeah.
know how to get in touch
Yeah.
with me, and I know all the paperwork. I know
Yeah.
exactly how to do it, and we'll do it together.
Yeah.
And we'll keep seeing come. So I think it will be cool. But like I said, it's an interesting one because had I gone and done it a month later, a month earlier, it kind of wouldn't matter. But because we were all in the race together, I really want to make sure that that Chris, Jan, and Gavin, they are the times to go for.
Yeah, that's just a kind of a cool way to do it and the whole process. And you don't have a lot of
Yeah,
ego attached to it. So that's really neat.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to go through real briefly a little bit of
Yeah.
your background because you are more than an accomplished stand-up paddleboarder. I mean, Yukon 1000, like I said, that's a PhD level kind of thing right there, a bucket list for a lot of people. So that's a lot of kudos to you on that. But you're also a
Thank you.
coach and a personal trainer as well.
Yeah,
Can you tell me
yeah,
a little bit briefly, a little bit about that?
yeah. So I mean, I've always trained myself all my life. Always
Yeah.
lived in a gym. So I've always had a passion there. Paddleboarding, actually, I started paddleboarding I tore my MCL kite surfing in 2017,
Yeah.
and paddleboarding was part of rehab.
Mm.
So up until then, I hadn't really. I had a paddleboard for fun days on the beach. To cut a very long story short, during COVID, I was training. I got accepted for the Yukon 1000 in 2019. So that's when I started really ramping my training up,
Hmm.
and I started getting really interested in the science behind ultras, fueling, nutrition,
Mm.
and and kind of life accumulated experience of training myself in the gyms. Started working with a personal trainer and started really getting interested in the ultra side of things. And we've probably all read the same books. If you're into ultra, we could probably list the top five and all say the same thing. And then when COVID come along and work, kind of my normal day job got dried up, I thought, well, let me do some qualifications here. So I ended up doing
Oh,
my
cool.
personal training
Oh,
diploma,
great.
which is pretty straightforward because I trained all my life. I knew it all anyway. Did sports nutrition online. I did strength and conditioning, and I did all my coaching from paddleboarding. So my B Super level 1, level 2,
Nice.
and just kind of filled my time when
Yeah.
work was quiet elsewhere. And so yeah, and I'm my own science experiment really.
Yeah.
Like I kind of love soaking it all up and then trying it out on myself and seeing what works and what doesn't work. I love helping people that are interested in. I don't do coaching full time. So it's not. It's a passion
Yeah.
I have. I
Yeah.
love to work with a handful of clients that are interested in something like the Thousand or something like the River Quest, all these Thames Ultras. Also, these are
Hmm.
people that like, they are already paddlers.
Hmm.
They are, and so yeah. So the coaching side coming around that really.
Mm.
So it's
Nice.
one of those things I enjoy dipping into,
Yeah.
um, and it keeps me on my toes or
Yeah.
on my paddleboard.
Yeah. Very,
Um,
very well rounded.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would love to do more of it. I mean, it's like uh, I get a lot of satisfaction. I actually had a guy that I've been coaching who's based in the US, and
Mm.
he flew over and did the 11 cities this weekend just
Oh,
gone,
nice.
and he finished it. And I had a
Awesome.
chat with him on WhatsApp earlier, and it was really nice. I spent sort of 4 weeks in the build up coaching him on just like more kind of like let up training. So soon to the race, there's not much I could teach him or tell him to do training wise 4 weeks out, but like a lot of it's about food, nutrition, some
Yeah.
mindsets and tactics, some mapping, tech,
Yeah.
using things like little things
Yeah.
and gear and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All those
Um,
are all really important things. I mean, for me, I became more of a well-rounded athlete in my later part of life. So I think cross training is really important. I'm curious,
huge.
since you have a background in personal training, if you're going to choose one beneficial strength gym training exercise, or I would say I actually have three on my notes here, but to make it easy
Ooh,
on you and the time, if you want to choose three, you can do one, but if it's one, what would you choose? That would
what
help
in the gym?
people. Something in the
Something in
gym
the
you can do for
gym.
stand-up paddleboarding that would be the most beneficial thing. 1 to 3 or
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I mean, firstly, strength and conditioning is important for anything in life.
sure.
The older you get, yeah. So that just if you're in there moving weight, then you're already going to be a long way ahead of everyone else. So if I was going to go, you're going to need to give me three. But like I was going to
Yeah.
do three exercises, so I would be doing things like squats. Um, I think just the whole range of motion, range of movement, the skills, and the whole kind of neural connections around that
Now,
side.
an
You know,
actual barbell squat.
barbell squat,
Okay.
yeah, or a machine squat. I mean, again, this is blanket advice to people I don't know, but like,
Sure. Squats in
you get
general.
yourself squats in general, a lot of rotation core. So, like, I love a good cable machine. Um, so, paid off press, I love doing. So, on a cable machine, arms out, some weight, and get twisted, just get that core.
Okay.
Um, and I guess a lot of people misunderstand that, like with paddleboarding, thinking it's all in the arms or the
Sure.
shoulders and stuff. But actually, the best thing it is in all over. That's why it's hard to pick a set things because
Yeah,
you can
just
have an
everything.
all-rounded,
Sure.
thing. So I'd be like, but I'd probably be, yeah, I think squats, core, any core work, and maybe pull-ups, lat pull down, something for your
Yeah.
lats. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all great. You were supposed to say your mind.
Oh, the mind. Yeah, but the mind. That
I'm
the
just kidding.
mind.
I'm just
Yeah, no,
kidding.
no, no.
That was
The
a trick
mind you can
question.
train at. Yeah, the mind you can train at home. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
the
that's
mind.
true.
go to the mind gym.
Yeah, yeah, go to the
That's
mind
oh,
gym. That's, I guess that's
I like that.
meditation.
I like that one. That's a quickly domain name search in a minute.
Yeah,
The
there
mind
you
gym.
go.
There we go.
Um, well, I mean, on top of all that, you're a talented creative director and you're working on a documentary about the Yukon 1000.
Mhm.
I've watched the trailer and it looks phenomenal. Top notch stuff right there.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see the whole feature. You're still working on it, correct? How's it going?
It's it's as you know, because I know you're in the same industry as well. So like
Yeah.
we got finally. It's a passion project. I've been doing it all off my own back.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it from a race that I was actually racing in as well. So like
Yeah. Yeah.
I've kind of had to work with what other teams, grabbing GoPro footage, grabbing interviews that I can shoot post race,
Yeah. I'm
big steering and
curious.
borrowing content. So I had hundreds of hours from other people, and that's been really tough because I've had to go through it all and try and turn it into some kind of
Yeah.
story.
Coherent thing.
Um, um, I've, and it's been an incredible. I've always wanted to do a documentary. They say that everyone's got a book in them. I don't like writing, so kind of I'm hoping this is my thing. Um, yeah, but it's been tough because I'm my own worst critic as well. And like I'm like, oh, if I was to do this again, I wasn't racing it, I would do this, this, and this, and I wouldn't do that, and I would shoot this, and I'd go and speak to these people. And but you have
Yeah.
to again, the whole thing, it's like I had to park those thoughts and be like, look, this is what I've got to work with. I'm only setting out here. This is not for anyone but me. And hopefully, if it's good, then others will like it. And if anything, if people that don't know the race watch it and enjoy it, or people that don't paddle enjoy it, and if people that want to race, I'm like, remember why you're doing it. So I finished the edit last weekend. Finally got picture lock, which basically means I'm happy with everything in there. It's 1 hour 32 minutes or
Oh,
something.
great. Perfect.
So I wanted to get it a little bit shorter, but I've now got to the point where I'm like, if I cut anything else, I'm going to lose stuff. I'm numb to it now. But I sent it to two
Sure.
friends that have got
That's good.
nothing to do with I've got nothing to do with paddling, and the response was really good, and I trust them.
That's
I'm
good.
like, okay, cool. It's now off with a good friend of mine who's doing the audio mix. Again, having different types of footage and different people, it's all over the place. He's tidying the audio up. We've got the music track going down. I composed a couple of pieces myself. Friends put some stuff down as well. So I've been finishing the color grade, which has been fun as well because there's so much different footage.
Yeah. I love color
It's
grading.
like I love it normally, but like an hour and 35 of
Oh,
footage
yeah.
from stuff you haven't filmed yourself and all that. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm just trying to make like I'm really proud of how it's looking. I'm really excited to put it out there. I loved it to the point where I hope it might open some more doors to doing. I would love to combine my experience with adventure racing, expedition paddling, um, and the filmmaking side. So being able to go out and create content, but in environments that need someone that also can be quite competent and capable on the water as well.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping this will come across with that. So yeah, it should be hopefully out. Yeah, well, probably end of September. It's hard to say. I go to Australia on the 29th of September. I'd love to have it out before then.
Yeah. It will
It,
come
it's
out and it'll be great.
yeah. So and I'm looking forward to putting it out there and just like closing my eyes and looking at
Uh
the stats a few days later. Yeah,
you no,
yeah.
you have the perfect personality for all that. So I've made some smaller YouTube videos myself about some of my adventures, but nothing at your scale. I'm curious what was the most challenging part about doing video at the Yukon 1000 was for you?
So not including filming
Just
ourselves
like
while racing it.
filming when you
I
were
mean,
doing GoPro while you were racing.
so that was that's because you want to see it or film it all, and that's the
Yeah.
problem. And the other
Yeah.
thing as
Yeah.
well is like, a GoPro is like the GoPro will never be able to show what it looks like with your own
Exactly.
eyes.
Exactly.
And the Yukon particularly, it's so vast and big and
Yeah.
barren, and your eyes see these mountains and cliffs, and
Yeah.
then you look on a GoPro and
Yeah.
it's
It's like
like
nothing.
it's a
Like what?
yeah, it's
Flat,
like so.
man.
So that was the hardest thing because
Yeah.
you had to
Yeah.
really kind of get over the fact that like
Yeah.
I can't capture it as it needs to be. It's kind
Yeah.
of I can only do my best. So that was tough, and obviously
Yeah.
managing things like batteries because on the Yukon everything's with you.
Yeah.
Kind of like
You're
I'm like, oh,
tired
I wish I
and
had. I wish I had this kit. I wish I had this lens or
yeah.
that. I'm like, no, I've just got this. So
Yeah.
that was fun. That was a challenge.
That's like the perfect answer. I can definitely identify with a lot
Yeah,
of those. Well, Craig,
yeah,
that's quite the accomplishment on all levels. I appreciate you coming in on and sharing your journey. And I'll put links to where people could find you, more about you and your documentary.
Awesome. Thank
Um,
you.
do you have any other race plans in the future, real quick?
So this year, last paddler standing commentary.
Yes.
So last paddler standing, I seem to found myself doing a 50-hour marathon talk session at the last paddler standing last year. So they've somehow asked me back, and hopefully I won't offend too many people. So this time I'm coming over to Sarasota to kind of run the live stream and be on
Yep.
the commentary team with Mason and Maddie, and Matthew from SUP, which I'm so looking forward to. Um, I've got great plans, as the rest of the team have, to turn that into. I'm calling it the Super Bowl of paddleboarding. I want it to have something that's really big and spectacular, and really interesting. And it's 50 hours nearly of live streaming, so we've got to try and find something, right? um, so yeah, that's I got that this year, and then next year I've got a heavy pencil for the River Quest. Um,
Nice.
um, I'd love to just get that right. It's the 25th anniversary next year,
Oh, wow.
for the River Quest, and it's a very different race to the 1,000. But I love that part of the world, and I'd love to go and do that.
Yeah.
I have silly ideas of learning to paddle a canoe or a kayak and doing the 1,000 again in a canoe or kayak,
Yeah.
um, but not again on a paddleboard. That's done now. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and then obviously Greg Wingo is going to keep hassling me about the Alabama
I was
650,
gonna
no
say.
doubt.
Yeah.
But like, I can deal with bears and moose, but like the thought of alligators, sharks, and moccasin snakes, like, so yeah,
Different stuff.
I'm sure Greg's going to keep pushing for that one to kind of go onto the list.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you wear a lot of hats and you do it well. And I think there's a coaching opportunity right there for you.
Amazing,
You're
thank
gonna,
you.
as you said, you're gonna be a commentator for Last Paddler Standing, and as you said, I mean, paddling is difficult, but talking for that long is also an incredible challenge. And you did an outstanding job last year, and I look forward to it again, as we all will. And thanks again for sharing your journey, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome, thanks, Michael.
Appreciate it.